Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Wordwise podcast. I'm Joe DeVille. This is Jesse Witkowski to my side, and Amar Georgeson, new guest, actually an old friend and a celebrity guest right now. Amar, we met in Kung Fu, and we were, gosh,
I think we were
13, 14, somewhere around that age.
Mhm.
So Amar's been living in China for the last 10 years, and I guess I just want to start by asking what made you decide to go to China? And I'm really curious, when you went there, how were you received as a white Westerner, an American, and how has that evolved since you've been living there for 10 years?
Sure. Well, first of all, when I went to China in 2008, it was at the very beginning of the year, doing the last semester of a bachelor's degree program back in the States with Humboldt State University. So the program was just international studies. Part of it was to live in another country, your focus country, for one semester and study there. And so that was my original reason to go. But I'd always been interested in China and Eastern philosophy, not even religion, but just philosophy, way of life, martial arts. We've been, doing Southern style kung fu together we did for years together. And so I think something in me, I always sort of knew I wanted to be in China at some point in my life. So that was how it all got started. And then after coming back, a teacher from my home university, Humboldt State University, wanted me to teach with their teacher exchange program in the university I was studying in. So they had a program where they were bringing a group of 20 Chinese students, just about 10 or 20 Chinese students every year, from Xi'an, the city where I live in, to our Humboldt State University campus in Northern California. And so I was hired onto that, and I went back after studying there for a semester, and I taught with them for 1 year, and I did it again for another year. Found I really enjoyed being there, and just continued on. Later, I continued to study Chinese and learn the language to a certain level, and just continued, just 1 year after another, just kept staying there. As far as how I was received there, I think as a student, I think you're fairly anonymous. You're just a student, but as you kind of progress and start to kind of integrate into the society, there are different, there are mixed kind of reactions towards Westerners. But generally, I would say it's a very warm and welcome reaction that I get from 90% of people, if not higher percentage. So I think people are very curious. People are curious about where you're from. Simple things like what you eat every day. They're really curious about our lifestyle here. They're curious, especially about the United States, because it's been such a influential world player for so long in the world.
And a competitor in some ways also.
That's right, and that's maybe where the other 10% comes in. Is that sometimes they think of you as their competitor, or their not even opponent, I would say, but kind of competitor. Kind of, they want to show that that some people in China want to kind of show that they themselves are just as good as America. That the country is just as good as America or better. And, so there's this sort of kind of competing relationship, but it's not a negative thing, I would say. Sometimes it gets annoying, but it's very seldom that you really feel it. So anyway, yeah, that's.
So for the people that are familiar with China, where did you live?
Well, I lived in Xi'an. I still live there now, actually. There with my wife in Xi'an. I often, for my work now, I travel a lot to Beijing and a few other cities around northern China. And if the way that you would know it is the Terracotta Warriors. So that's the city that has the Terracotta Warriors just next to it. The story goes 2,000 years ago, there's the first emperor of China that unified the country into one single country, one single entity, instead of all the warring factions that were prevalent at the time. He finally unified the entire country, but it was short-lived. It was only for about 16 years, I think, that it was fully unified under him, and he finally passed away. And then when he died, he had his artisans craft thousands of clay soldiers in the likeness of all of his army, including his generals, his his foot soldiers, his the different levels of soldier there were, and the horses, the horse-drawn carriages. They were all created out of clay and wood, and they were all buried in his massive tomb. So that's the story of the terracotta warriors, and
So
it's quite interesting. Yeah.
I didn't know that. So when he had them made, you wanted there to be a terracotta statue for each of his
Yes,
people to look like them and everything.
and if you look closely at each statue, it has the likeness of each soldier.
Amazing.
Each one is different, and each one was painted a different, with skin color and hair color, and it's pretty interesting.
Wow.
So if anybody has a chance, they should go to Xi'an and take a look. But anyway, that's the city where I live and have stayed for a while. So yeah, any more questions? Does that cover it?
That comes to my mind at this time.
Well, I'll break into a more specific subject, Kung Fu itself.
Sure.
And definition I've looked up for Kung is accomplishment, Fu is effort.
Mm-hmm.
So accomplished effort. Would you want to elaborate or
Well, sure.
clarify on what I'm saying a little more?
Sure. Well, I think the common idea in China or in Chinese language is that the Gong Fu, we say in Mandarin, we say Gong Fu. And in the South, they might have a more Kung Fu sort of a sound. But in Mandarin, we say Gong Fu. Gong Fu just means skill, just like you're saying. It means effort. It really just means effort. So somebody, you could say in any field, if somebody puts effort into anything, their studies or learning an instrument, or you see that they have really good talent in something, you say, oh, 他们下得好功夫, which means that they've really put in a lot of effort. They've really, shada just means, I don't know, maybe put down a lot of effort, throwing down a lot of effort into what they're doing.
Because there is that philosophy of 10,000 hours of effort and you become a master in it. So that
Right.
must be what they mean by putting down the effort. You're building up the hours
Sure.
of work.
Sure. Yeah. It's endless. But Gong Fu is something you can even see. You can see talent in somebody when you see them playing an instrument, or somebody who's even at an airport scanning you with his little electric wand, scanning for any metal on your body. Some people are really good at it, and the people who are really good at it, it's like a form, and it's like oh, how Gong Fu.
Wow.
So yeah, that would be my perspective on Kung Fu.
I kind of see that there's an art to everything. So it's the same thing, even if you're wanding people for detecting metal, there's an art to it.
Exactly.
There's a concise way to not waste motion, and there's just so many levels to anything if you look into it and you dig into it.
Yeah.
Baking, writing, singing, it all is an art.
And I think that we learned this from practicing with our teacher here in Grass Valley, with Robert Phillips, learning Kung Fu, our style of Kung Fu. We learned that concept from that class, I feel.
Now, our style of Kung Fu, Robert always taught us, it's Kung Fu Sansu, which he said was working man trained to fight. Like, is that accurate from what you've learned in China?
Well, I think it was something like, the whole definition in the Sansu world is more like a man or a woman who's trained in the realm of hand-to-hand combat. So that's the definition that Jimmy Woo, Chin Sudak, our Grandmaster, came forth with. I guess in modern Mandarin, I guess we would call, we'd switch it around. It'd be Sanshou Gong Fu. Sanshou is more of an adjective, and then Gong Fu is more of the, what do you call it? I guess the noun, I guess, right? It would be the thing that we do. So Sanshou, San means dispersing, and Shou means hand. But Sanshou just means it together in certain contexts. Chinese is a very contextual language, so it depends on the context what the meaning of the words are. So the Sanshou just means combat. So Sansu Kung Fu, it just means it basically means the same thing that Robert was saying. Just that Sanshou Kung Fu just means effort and skill in combat.
Right.
Yeah.
One thing I've heard the word before, Wushu, but only recently, upon reading David Chow's book, did I realize that was actually maybe more of what China itself uses as the word, and it's militaristic techniques.
Well, there are a few things we could say about this. One, the definition of wushu is just what martial arts. So the word martial arts in Chinese is wushu. Shu is art, like yishu means art, like paintings or sculptures, the arts, right? Yishu. Wu means martial, so martial arts is wushu. So that's the literal definition of wushu. What the word means, what the two characters together, wushu, together mean, is a bit more than that. I mean, it really encompasses. I mean, it encompasses all of the arts, all of the martial arts of China, right? So it's everything from Tai Chi, Bagua, Xing Quan, what else? Tai Chi Quan, right? Hong Quan. I've done a style of Hong Quan in northern China. There's also the southern Hong Quan, which is a bit different. Chai Li Fo Quan, Fo Jia Quan, Yong Chun Quan, Wing Chun. So there are all sorts of different martial arts, right?
So even if you went outside the field to like Western boxing or wrestling, they would call that wushu as well.
It would call it, yes, it'd be under the umbrella of wushu, right? Yeah, but they call it, of course, boxing by let's see, Chuanji, Chuanji, right? Yeah. So,
Chuan is like fist.
Yeah, Chuanji is fist. Yeah, Chuanji is the strike. So fist striking. Yeah. But then now what's popular, interesting, going back to Sansu, in China now, Sanda, this term Sanda, is very popular. It's what people learn a lot when they want to compete, do competition fighting, sports fighting, like kickboxing, but also with thrown in as well. It's a lot like what we did here in
MMA.
Yeah, it's just MMA, but there are just more rules. It's more sport oriented, and it's not like the UFC stuff. It's more like sport oriented. And that is basically what we learned, Sansho or Sansu, but just without, the way we learned it is we're learning it for self-defense. They learn it for sport. There's two different things. Yeah, but that's basically the same sort of thing.
Okay. I know you're a busy man and we don't want to keep you too long, but and this is a very convoluted and long subject, but if you can give us a brief breakdown of maybe the history of Kung Fu and Sansu, if that can be extrapolated.
The history of Kung Fu is actually one that's very, I mean, different people have different ideas. It tends to be debated. Some people say it's from the monk Tamo, who came from India, came to the Xi'an temple in Henan, and he was training monks how to strengthen their bodies so they can meditate more effectively in their temples. I think there are different stories about how martial arts started, but I mean, I think in the beginning, all cultures had martial arts, and China had theirs, India had theirs, and other countries around there had their own ways of fighting, because fighting is just a natural thing that happens in life, and especially in the old days. And so it's difficult to really say exactly. Maybe, I mean, I'm sure historians have their own perspective, but I haven't delved into the subject well enough to say I know definitively how Kung Fu started, so I couldn't say. For Sansu, I think you want to ask about how Sansu started, is that right? How Sansu came about was something I know a little bit more about, which is kind of the subject of that book there with this.
Let's take a segue, and this is Almar's book, by the way. You want to just say what this is,
sure,
in case anybody's interested in finding it?
Sure. Well, the book is, I mean, I put it together about 5 years ago, and it was, I mean, since I was living in China and I'd done martial arts for a long time here in California, I wanted to go find the origin of the art that we studied. And so I took a trip down to where our Grandmaster grew up when he was a kid. And when I was there, I met his cousin, who's not that old right now. She was a younger cousin who was adopted by his mother, and also right now takes care of the family tomb, like our teacher Jimmy Woo's tomb, as well as Jimmy Woo's parents' tombs as well. They're in a big house, so she's kind of taking care of the family ancestry there. Anyway, so I went there. I spent some time with her family, and also Jimmy's teacher's grandson, which was kind of interesting. So I was able to talk to him for a while about the history of their family, history of the art, some of the stories that we heard when we were training. So about Sansu, how that kind of got started, Sansu in the West. And some people debate it, and I don't need to go into the big debates about it, but I formed my perspective on it from being there and talking to the people there. And so Jimmy Woo, or Chin Sudak as is known in his Cantonese name, he grew up in a place called Guangdong province, in a town called Taishan. I'm going to speak in Mandarin dialect here. So it's Guangdong, Taishan. In Cantonese, it's Canton, Hoisan. But in Taishan City, he grew up there. This is his training partner when he was a child, this fellow here. And his name is, let's see, this teacher's name was Chen Jiaoshong, which was the crazy devil that we always heard about when we were in training. So Jimmy's uncle trained him. This is Jimmy's uncle's son, so Jimmy's cousin. So they trained together until about 20 years old, and then when the Japanese invaded, they kind of invaded the whole area. Jimmy left Taishan with some training information. His father was in LA already, so he came to meet his father in LA. His father had a restaurant in the 50s, and he worked with his dad for quite some time. Actually, maybe before the 1950s, his father was here with a restaurant. Jimmy was here working with him. After a while, Jimmy said, "You know what? I know Kung Fu. I'm getting older now." Jimmy was about either in his 50s when he started teaching Americans, and he started his own karate Kung Fu club in LA. Could have been Riverside, around Riverside area. And it's around there, it's in LA anyway. And started teaching to Westerners, and he called it karate kung fu at first, and then later just called it sansho. Sansho, and what that is taking, in China now, how people practice the martial arts is they practice forms. We always learned that they always practice forms for a long time before they learned how to fight with it. And it's still pretty much true. The teacher in China will teach you forms for years until he decides that, you know what, all right, I'll teach you some stuff about how to use it. So it's very old school in China with certain teachers, with the right teacher. But here in the States, Jimmy just taught the fighting aspect directly because that's what people wanted to learn. So he decided to teach it. He was a good judge of character, from what I understand, and so he didn't want to teach anybody who was just out to hurt people or whatever. So he would make a judgment on who came to study with him, and he would teach. He would teach. And Sansu just means the application aspects of the forms of the traditional arts. So you take the traditional arts, traditional movements from the forms and whatnot, and he would adapt them to how to use them in a confrontation, in a fight. So that's what he taught, and that's how Sansu kind of got started, and that's what stuck in the States. So it was really something that he brought with him from his old village in Canton or in Guangdong, and then kind of made it into his own art when he was here. What he learned when he was over there was Choi Li Foot. So Choi Li Foot and also Fuke or Fo Jia Quan, Chai Li Fo. So these two, these are very prevalent in the south. They're from the southern Shaolin monastery. So these arts came out of that monastery. So he was teaching, he was studying these with his uncle, when his uncle was teaching him and his cousin. So those are his family arts. Those are his base arts. He brought them over to the States when he was around 20, 21. And then he possibly used it when he first came to LA to defend himself and so on. And it kind of evolved as time went on, and then he started to teach what he knew.
So this predated Bruce Lee.
Let's see, Bruce Lee was in the 50s and 60s. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, he was in the LA before Bruce Lee. He started teaching, I think, there's some videos on YouTube about his old school when it started. I think he started teaching in the late 50s or early 60s, but you'd want to check that out for sure. But yeah, it's kind of around the same time. In LA, Kung Fu is kind of getting more popular. Bruce Lee made it widely popular. But there's some other heavy hitters in the West Coast as well. Yeah, there are important people, and Chin Sudek was one of them. Jimmy Woo was one of them.
Now you mentioned Fuka, and that was one of when we were taking Kung Fu, you wouldn't start learning that until you were a brown belt level.
Yeah.
And the way I understood it when I was going through the class was all of our techniques were responding to attacks, and Fuka would be being the first one to attack. They were techniques. Is that how that boiled out when you went to China and learned more about it?
Well, what I understand is Fojia Quan or Futka in Mandarin is Fojia. So Fojia Quan is another school of fighting. It's another art. Just like Chou Li Foot is an art. There's Fojia and Cai Li Fo, right? Chou Li Foot is Cai Li Fo. So it's just another art, another family art. And so it's not to say that only in Fojia Quan they only attack first, like we learned in class. I think it was just a way. I think it's just a way to teach Westerners. I think it was a way that he called it a certain thing, like these are Futka techniques, and so we'll just attack. And maybe it used some of the movements from the Fojia original art. But it was a bit different when it was taught to Westerners. I think it was just a name. Because there are other names. There's like Dapka and there's some other things. Asu. Yeah, these are just kind of terms, kind of to differentiate different kinds of techniques. I didn't think they really had much meaning, to be honest.
Chou Li Foot is 3 of the 5 families. I've always heard that we were 5 families. What were the other 2?
Well, there's the 5 family art of Sansu, as we've been taught, is Choi Li Ho. In Cantonese again, Choi Li Ho Foot Hung. And then there's the last word of Ga, which means family, right?
Okay.
And in Mandarin it'd be Cai Li He Fo Xiong. Here, I'll turn this around. This is I don't know if you guys can see it or not, but it's the black characters out right there in the back of the book. Cai Li He Fo Xiong Jia. And so again, Chou Li Foot, these are from the Chou Li Foot that he studied. Fojia, Futka is also added there. I asked some people about the Ho family or the He, and people were not very sure. So I'm guessing that at some point he had a teacher, either in the States or in China. That was maybe his last name was He or Ho. Maybe they were training together and he learned a few things from that. Some people say that He's the He character, the third character there. Means together. I don't know about that, but it's hard to get a straight answer sometimes from people. But that's, for me, I think that was the last name of somebody that he learned from. So the Ho Foot Hung. And Hung means power. So he could have, there is a martial art called Xiongja or Hunga. There's Hungar, which is, I think, a bit different from what he taught us. But there's another art called Xiongja Chen. There are many arts, and people have with the last name of Hung or Xiong, which means hero. It also means hero. It also means strength. And there are different arts and different techniques associated with that name as well, that family as well. So he could have had a teacher whose last name was Xiong or Hung, or he wanted to add power elements to it from himself as well. So it could be either one.
I wanted to bring up, and I think in the West he has the originator Bodhidharma, which I believe is a Sanskrit word. You used a different term, the Chinese name.
Oh, it's
Damo.
Damo is
Damo.
Damo, yeah.
Okay.
That's what I've heard, but I don't fully. I'm not a historian,
so. And he was a Buddhist. Can you differentiate some of the Buddhist versus Taoist influence upon the art?
Well, I don't know much, but from what I understand, that the Xi'an monasteries were mainly Buddhist influence, but there's also a series of temples in Wuhan, near Wuhan in Hubei province, called Wudangshan or Wudang Mountain, which I'm sure many people have heard of. This is where Tai Chi came from. This is where the Taoist influence came into martial arts. And so that was very Taoist philosophy, living on the mountain, practicing Tai Chi, and but again, I don't know a whole lot about that. So without being, I should just say that.
Okay, they do seem the Taoists seem like they incorporated more of a soft style. I know you kind of looked at me a little questioningly when we talked about that beforehand, but
Well, I mean, most martial artists would just, or most people who do kung fu in China would say that every art is soft and hard. So you could say that Tai Chi is primarily a soft style, but it was developed for fighting. People do it for health, primarily, if not only now. But it was originally in order to fight. I mean, it was, these movements are not just for health. They're used to push somebody away or to pull somebody's arm down and trip them or something. So these were martial arts, and but there is soft and hard in every art, there are these elements in every art. So yeah.
and my last question for you is, can you differentiate between southern and northern styles of the Chinese arts? You always hear people who know about kung fu hear about that differentiation a lot in China.
Yeah. Everybody who doesn't know anything will just say that, okay, Nan Chan Bei Tui. That means that in the south, people use their fists. In the north, people use their feet, their legs. That's most people's understanding. It's just that very simple. But we also see that that's quite true. In our art, in Sansu, we're mainly upright. Our stances are high. We're using our upper body for the most part for striking and some kicking, but not very much. Whereas in the north, you see more lower stances, and you see some leaping, some things that are jumping, and just all kinds of different crazy stances. So yeah, I mean, and from what I understand, that's the biggest difference between the two. Yeah, it's just that there's in the south, the southern styles are more they're more upright. Like we learned. In the north, they're more leg oriented. There are deeper stances, wider stances, longer stances. In the southern arts, they also have long stances as well. But in general, there is that distinction.
An interesting thing I kind of heard about that was the north is more cold, the south is more jungly and dense and whatnot. So a way for them to practice was to warm up, so that leaping kind of affected the northern art or the environment itself, whereas the southern style went around more of a city-oriented or working your way around jungle trees or bamboo or whatnot.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That could very well be. Yeah.
So we wanted to keep this sort of concise. We're almost at a half hour here. Was there a story? Were we going to end with a story?
We usually do on the Wordswise program, so.
Okay. Well, what to say? I mean, there are quite a few stories, but one story just about, let's keep it on kung fu. One story about the ability of some people. We never really know what somebody's capable of until we know. And one thing that I learned from a friend, we talk, a friend of mine there in Xi'an, we talk a lot about these sorts of things, and he was saying that and I've seen this video of him being there. He went to a school out in the countryside, and there was an older woman teaching. And what they teach what's called chuojiao, and what this means is stabbing foot. And my friend learned it, and he learned it a long time ago from his teacher. And he wanted me to see what it was. He showed me a little bit about it, and there are different ways of doing it, some different stances, backward stances, and coming down on top of the foot. There's just different things that but he wanted to show me one thing that was pretty impressive. And there's a school in the countryside around in Shanxi, and it's taught. There's an older woman who teaches it, runs the school, and she teaches this chuojiao method. And so first you see in the yard where they train, you see all these trees that have been cut away bare, trees, and they're cut off, so they're just tree poles. Just their trunks are about 6 feet tall. Some are thin, an inch or less, and some are thicker, about several inches and so on. And so the teacher came out, the woman, old master teacher was out, and she was asked to show what she can do. And she said, okay, I can do that. Okay, we can, we practice kicking these trees. So here, I'll do this. So I'll break this tree at the base. I'll kick it, and I might have to kick it a couple times, but it'll break off at the base. Now this tree was about this thick. It's about 3 inches in diameter. And and she was wearing, like those plastic kung fu shoes, just like what we used to wear in class. Just plastic sole, hard plastic, little cloth shoe, right? So you say, okay, ready? Okay, ready. She kicks it once, kicks it twice, and it's down. It broke. This 3-inch thick tree just broke, like it was nothing. And she just kicked it twice with the ball of her foot, a little snap kick. And they're full of trees. I mean, they go out to any tree next time you have a spare moment, and just try to kick it lightly. Don't break your foot, but just try to kick it lightly and see how hard it would be to kick a tree and snap it off at the base, right next to the ground, at the base, and see if you could think about if you could do that in 2 kicks. So,
wow.
Yeah. So you never know what a person can do until you know.
Masters are hidden in all sorts of bodies.
Yeah, right.
That's
You
cool.
wouldn't expect it.
Well, thanks everybody for tuning in with us, and we hope to have some more videos quickly, and catch you that time. Guys, Omar, thanks very much for coming.
Thank you.
Honored to have you, Amar.
Thank you very much. Honored to be here.